Hey Reddit, I'm Daniel, 36, and 10 years ago, I made a decision that changed my life. I married my best friend's sister. Not for love, not for romance, but because she needed help. For years, we kept things strictly platonic. But then I did something incredibly stupid. It all started with a phone call I never expected. I was making breakfast for my two kids, Liam 6 and Sophie 4, when my best friend Mark called me out of the blue. "Hey, man," he said, his voice tense. "I need to ask you something, and it's big." I frowned, wiping pancake batter off my hands. "What's going on?" Mark hesitated, then exhaled sharply. "It's about Emily." Emily, his younger sister. She was a good person, but life hadn't been kind to her. She was struggling, stuck in a job with no benefits, and now her health was on the line. "She needs insurance," Mark said bluntly, "and the only way she can get it is if she gets married." I went completely still. "Wait," I said slowly. "Are you asking me to marry your sister?" Mark groaned. "I know how it sounds, but yes, it's not a real marriage. Just on paper. She needs coverage, and you have solid benefits through your job. It's just a way to help her out." I ran a hand down my face. "Jesus, Mark, I wouldn't ask if I had any other options," he admitted. "But she's scared, man. And after what you went through with Jenna," I clenched my jaw. "Jenna, my late wife, the mother of my kids. She passed away 2 years ago, and I was still picking up the pieces." "I don't know, man," I finally said. "Marriage is a big thing." "Not this one," Mark said. "No expectations, no drama, just paperwork. You help her, and once she's stable, you both move on." It sounded simple, logical even, but something deep inside me hesitated. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the couch, staring at an old photo of Jenna and me. Would she have wanted me to do this? Would she have told me to help someone who needed it? I already knew the answer. A week later, Emily and I stood in front of a judge at City Hall, signing papers that made us husband and wife. No wedding, no rings, just a contract and a shared agreement. This wasn't real. We weren't in love. We weren't building a life together. It was just a favor. At least, that's what I thought, because neither of us could have predicted what would happen next. For the first few months, nothing really changed. Emily moved into the guest room. We set some basic rules, and life carried on as usual. To the outside world, we were married, but inside our house, we were just two people coexisting under the same roof. And for a while, it worked. Emily got the insurance she desperately needed and started her treatments. Her health improved. She got a better job. I kept raising my kids, going to work, handling my responsibilities. We had our routines. She helped with the kids when she could, and in return, I made sure she felt welcome in the house. It was comfortable, maybe too comfortable. The first time I noticed things shifting, it was small. One evening, I walked into the kitchen and saw Emily helping Sophie with her reading homework. She was patient, pointing at the words, encouraging her when she stumbled. Sophie was beaming, completely focused on Emily, and I just stood there, watching, because for the first time in years, my daughter had a mother figure again, and that scared the hell out of me. A few weeks later, it happened again. I came home late from work, exhausted, expecting the usual chaos of bedtime with two kids. Instead, the house was quiet. I walked into the living room and saw Emily curled up on the couch with Liam and Sophie, reading them a bedtime story. They were completely absorbed. She glanced up and smiled when she saw me. "Hey, you made it." I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. Yeah, I should have walked away. I should have reminded myself that this was temporary. Instead, I sat down in the armchair across from them and listened as she finished the story. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was home. I tried to ignore it, tried to remind myself that this was just a favor. But then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday. The kids were asleep. Emily and I were sitting on the back porch, drinking beer, talking about nothing in particular. And then she laughed. Not just any laugh, a real, genuine, carefree laugh. I hadn't heard that sound in years, and something inside me cracked. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw her not as Mark's little sister, not as my platonic roommate, but as a woman, and that terrified me. I stood up abruptly. I should get to bed. Emily's smile faltered. Oh, yeah, of course. I didn't wait for her to say anything else. I just walked inside, heart pounding. This was a mistake. I couldn't afford to feel this way, because if I did, I was going to ruin everything. The next morning, I tried to pretend nothing had changed. I got up early, made breakfast, focused on the kids. Emily came downstairs, still in her pajama shorts and an oversized hoodie, looking way too comfortable in my house. Morning, she said, grabbing a mug for coffee. I nodded but didn't say anything. She noticed. You okay? Yeah. I forced a smile. Just tired. She studied me for a second, then shrugged and took her coffee to the table. But I knew she wasn't buying it, because later that day, she did something she had never done before. She pushed back. I was in the garage fixing something on Liam's bike when Emily walked in, arms crossed. Okay, what's going on? She asked. I wiped my hands on a rag. What do you mean? She rolled her eyes. You've been weird all day. I'm fine. She narrowed her eyes. Bullshit. I froze. Emily never swore. Talk to me, she said, softer this time. I exhaled, setting down my tools. I don't think this is a good idea anymore. Her expression shifted. What isn't? This, I gestured around. You living here. Playing house. It's starting to feel real. She blinked. And that's a bad thing. Yes, I said immediately. Because this isn't real. Silence. And then she nodded like she understood. But before she walked away, she said something that stuck with me. I don't know about you, Daniel, she murmured, but it feels pretty real to me. Then she left. And I stood there, gripping the bike handles, realizing I had completely lost control. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying our conversation, kept thinking about the way Emily looked at me, like she wanted this, like maybe, just maybe, she had feelings too. And that thought alone scared me more than anything. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next, because 2 days later, Emily came home with a date. And when I saw another man in my kitchen, laughing with her, I felt something I had no right to feel. Jealousy. I walked into the kitchen, expecting the usual scene. Emily making dinner, the kids running around, the normal chaos of our not-so-normal household. Instead, I saw him, some guy, standing next to Emily at the stove, laughing like he belonged there. I froze. Emily glanced up and saw me. Her smile faltered, just for a second, before she covered it up. Hey, Daniel, she said, like nothing was wrong. This is Ryan. Ryan. I didn't shake his hand. I barely nodded, because at that moment, all I could think was, what the hell is he doing in my house? The kids ran in, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Ryan's funny. Sophie giggled. Liam grinned. Yeah, he taught us a magic trick. I clenched my jaw. Of course he did. I should have been polite. Should have acted like a mature adult. Instead, I turned to Emily and said, "Can I talk to you for a second?" Her smile flickered. Sure. She followed me into the hallway, out of earshot. The second we were alone, I crossed my arms. Who is this guy? Emily frowned. I told you. His name's Ryan. That's not what I meant. My voice came out sharper than I intended. What's he doing here? Her eyes narrowed. He's here because I invited him. I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my cool. Emily? What? She challenged. Am I not allowed to date? That shut me up. She shook her head, folding her arms. You don't get to act like this, Daniel. You were the one who said this wasn't real. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. She was right. I was the one who built that wall between us. And now that she was finally listening, I hated it. Dinner was hell. Ryan sat at my table, ate my food, made my kids laugh like it was the easiest thing in the world. Emily looked happy, and I was miserable. For the first time, I understood exactly how stupid I'd been. I had pushed her away, and now I might have lost her for good. Later that night, after Ryan left and the kids were asleep, Emily was in the kitchen cleaning up. I walked in, hands in my pockets. She didn't look at me. I cleared my throat. So, you and Ryan? She sighed. Yeah, Daniel. Me and Ryan. I nodded, staring at the floor. He seems nice. Emily scoffed. Don't do that. Do what? She turned to face me, her expression unreadable. Don't act like you care when you made it clear you don't. Her words hit like a punch to the gut. She was right again, but I wasn't about to admit it. I should have let it go, should have walked away, but I couldn't. So I did something impulsive, something I shouldn't have done. I stepped closer. Emily tensed. Daniel, don't. But I ignored the warning in her voice. I reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her breath hitched. For a second, just a second, I saw something in her eyes, something real. And then, just like that, she pulled away. I can't do this, she whispered. Then she turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with the mess I had created. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying everything. The dinner, Ryan, the way Emily looked at him, and the way she looked at me before she walked away. I knew I had to do something. I just didn't know if I was already too late. I woke up the next morning feeling like absolute crap. Barely slept, barely ate, spent half the night staring at the ceiling, wondering how I let things get to this point. I could hear Emily in the kitchen, making breakfast for the kids. Our usual routine. Except now, it didn't feel usual. It felt wrong. Because for the first time since she moved in, I wasn't sure if she'd still be here tomorrow. When I finally walked into the kitchen, she didn't even look up. She just kept making pancakes, acting like last night never happened. Morning, I muttered, sitting at the table. Liam and Sophie were already eating, completely oblivious to the tension hanging between us. Emily finally glanced at me. Morning, that was it. No smile, no warmth, just a polite, empty greeting. It felt worse than her being mad. I forced myself to eat, but everything tasted like cardboard. Liam was talking about some project for school. Sophie was rambling about her dolls. Normal, happy morning chatter. Emily nodded along, laughing at the right moments, acting like everything was fine. Like she hadn't walked away from me last night. Like she hadn't looked at me like I was just some guy she used to know. I hated it. After breakfast, I caught her in the hallway while the kids ran off to get their shoes. We need to talk, I said. Emily sighed. Daniel. Not later, I cut in. Now. She hesitated, then finally nodded. Fine. We stepped into the living room, out of earshot of the kids. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to find the right words. But Emily spoke first. This isn't fair, she said quietly. I looked at her. What isn't? She let out a bitter laugh. This. You. Acting like I'm the one who crossed a line. I clenched my jaw. I never said that. You didn't have to, she shot back. You shut me out for years, Daniel. And the second I try to move on, suddenly you... She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. Suddenly I pressed. She looked at me, eyes burning. Suddenly, you care? I had nothing to say to that, because she was right. I had shut her out. I'd spent years pretending what we had wasn't real. And now, I was acting like she was the one doing something wrong. She folded her arms, her voice quieter now. I meant it, Daniel, she said. I can't do this. Something in my chest twisted. Emily, I can't keep living in this limbo. She cut in. I need more. And if you can't give me that, then I have to walk away. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Walk away, I echoed. She nodded, and I could see it in her face. She wasn't bluffing. If I didn't fix this right now, I was going to lose her. For a second, I panicked. I wanted to beg, to tell her not to go. But that wasn't what she needed. She needed honesty. She needed me to say what I should have said years ago. So I exhaled, my heart pounding. You're right, I admitted. Emily blinked, caught off guard. What? You're right, I repeated. I shut you out. I kept pretending this was temporary, that we weren't really us. I stepped closer. But we are, Emily. We always have been. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't say anything. So I kept going. I was scared, I admitted. I thought that if I let myself feel anything for you, I'd be betraying Jenna. Emily's breath hitched. But last night, I swallowed hard. Last night, when I saw you with him, her eyes searched mine. Daniel, I exhaled. I was jealous. Finally, I said it. Finally, I admitted the thing I had been running from for so long. I don't want to lose you, I whispered. Not to him. Not to anyone. Silence. Then Emily took a shaky breath. Then don't, she murmured. And for the first time, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. Emily didn't walk away. Not this time. We stood there, staring at each other, and for the first time in years, there were no barriers, no excuses, no pretending. I had finally admitted the truth. Now, all that was left was what she would do with it. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hands were clenched at her sides, like she was bracing for impact. I knew this wasn't easy for her. She had spent years being patient, letting me grieve, letting me figure myself out, and all she ever asked for in return was honesty. I had given her that. But was it too late? Emily let out a slow breath. I don't know what you want me to say, Daniel. I swallowed. Say whatever you're feeling. She let out a small, dry laugh. What I'm feeling. She shook her head. You really want to know? I nodded. She stepped closer, staring me down. I feel angry. That wasn't what I expected. I've spent years in this house, raising your kids, being your wife in everything but name, she continued, her voice shaking. And you just pretended it didn't mean anything. I opened my mouth, but she didn't let me speak. I watched you shut yourself off, Daniel. I watched you refuse to move forward. And I accepted it because I thought that's what you needed. Her eyes burned. And now, after all this time, you finally decide you're ready? She let out a shaky breath. Do you even realize how unfair that is? I did. God, I did. I should have told her sooner. Should have admitted to myself and to her that what we had wasn't just some convenient arrangement. It was a real marriage. I had been too scared to face that truth. And now, I might have already lost her because of it. I took a deep breath. You're right, Emily. Her brows furrowed. I was a coward, I admitted. I thought that if I let myself care about you, really care about you, I'd be betraying Jenna. Emily flinched. But that's not true, I continued. Jenna's gone. I'll always love her, but I'm here. With you, I exhaled. And I don't want to lose you. For a long moment, Emily didn't say anything. Then she whispered, Then prove it. I blinked. What? She crossed her arms. You can't just say it, Daniel. Words mean nothing. She met my eyes, steady and unwavering. If you want me, really want me, You have to show me a challenge, a choice. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to take it. I stepped closer. Emily held her breath but didn't back away. My hands found her waist. Her fingers curled against my shirt. I could feel her trembling, feel her waiting. So I leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't slow. It wasn't hesitant. It was years of denial, tension, frustration, finally breaking all at once. Emily gasped against my lips, and I pulled her closer, afraid to let go, because I knew if I did, I might lose her forever. She kissed me back, and that was all I needed to know. 6 months later, life didn't magically fix itself overnight, but something changed that day. Something shifted. Emily and I stopped tiptoeing around each other. We stopped pretending. She moved out of the guest room. I stopped calling this a favor and started calling it what it was, a marriage, a real one. And for the first time in years, I was happy. We were happy. One evening, I was tucking Sophie into bed when she looked up at me, her little face serious. "Daddy." "Yeah, sweetheart." She grinned. "Are you and Auntie Emily in love now?" I froze. Emily, who had just walked into the room, did too. Sophie giggled, because it looks like it. Liam smirked from across the room. "Yeah, you guys are way less weird now." Emily and I exchanged glances. Then we laughed, because they were right. Later that night, as Emily and I sat on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder, she whispered, "We made it, didn't we?" I kissed the top of her head. "Yeah," I murmured. "We did." And this time, I wasn't going to let fear take it away from me.